Right now I don't have a tripod, I have a bipod. So this is the angle I record videos in until it's fixed. And this may be my last video in a minute just because I'm going back to school. And, shit get real in school. Hello everybody, I want to talk about the Winter Soldier and Red Hood. I feel these characters, they're really similar. And I feel in popular culture, for example, we put them in the same category, especially if you don't know much about them. They're both former sidekicks of the main hero who were killed and then came back as assassins. And if that's all you know about them, it's yeah, they're very similar. But I decided to go back and read their first story arcs where they came back and see just how different and similar they both are. And they are very different. Now, an interesting thing I just realized is that they both came back in the same year. They both came back in 2005. And very interesting that they both came back at the same time. And the quality is just very different. You see just how much nonsense comic books can get into sometimes with the Red Hood one in particular. Tell me if you've heard this before. So, a war hero, okay, gets frozen, gets training from a government, and given a metal tool of some sort to fight for the ideals of that particular nation. Who am I talking about? That's right. Bucky Barnes, the Winter Soldier. The Winter Soldier in particular. He is very much like the anti-Captain America. It's a very dark reflection of what could have been Captain America easily. Steve came back in the ideal circumstances. He was found by, a non-government entity who wasn't trying to extract stuff from his blood. But for Bucky, they found him and they just found a weapon. The Avengers, they found a friend and a leader, a confidant. But the government of Russia, the Soviet Union at that time, they just found a weapon to use against America. And a lot of the story, the first arc, really is just about how much he had to endure. He was a prisoner in his own mind. Anytime he had an inkling of any sort of freedom, it was taken away from him. As Steve was forming a new life, Bucky was taken away from his any type of life. And that might be what the story is talking about, freedom and control, because even the main villain, he's under the control of the Red Skull, and the main villain is being controlled by the Red Skull, and now he's controlling the Winter Soldier. And Steve's whole thing is he's Captain America. He wants, justice and freedom and shit like that. So he's trying to save his friend and make him realize who he was. And the MacGuffin of the story is the cosmic cube, and everybody's trying to grab it. At the end of the story, we see that Steve gets a hand on the cube, and the whole story, we are told about how everybody who's ever gotten the cube, it's gone bad for them. It's essentially a monkey's paw, because depending on how you say it and the kind of the darkness in your heart, you get different results. And Steve being essentially the purest person possible who can wield it, he is unselfishly as he can, he gives the gift of cosmic power, and he tells Bucky, remember who you are. And the specific wording is that, remember who you are. And so who he was all comes flooding back to him. But at the same time, it's all the Winter Soldier programming comes there too. And so now it's a mismatch of old Bucky memories and Winter Soldier memories, and he can't handle that. And he realizes he is a monster. He's a villain. And he tells Steve, you have to kill me now. The first conscious thought he's had in decades. And he's you have to stop me. I'm a monster. And of course, Steve just got his friend, his only connection to his old life back. And he doesn't want to get rid of that. But Bucky takes it upon himself. And finally, with the first bit of agency he's had in years, he takes his own life right in front of his best friend. And of course, it's comic books. That's not exactly what happened. He takes the cube in his hand, and it just teleports him away. But the still like that concept is really powerful, and it's really well done. This is Ed Brubaker, and his run on Captain America was really good. And I love all whole Bucky's arc, especially like what happens after the fact. But this first story really sets up Bucky really well as a sympathetic like victim. He's a victim. This whole time he has been used for years, and now he has a life that he can live for himself, and he's like in the same shoes that Steve was many years ago. And I really like this resurrection, like, because essentially it is just Cap's story all over again. And if reading this and then reading Under the Red Hood, I'm like, okay, Marvel and DC took really different directions when it came to, the resurrection of these old heroes. So, Under the Red Hood, we get an interesting way of bringing back bringing back Red Hood. So Superboy Prime punched the walls of reality, which then caused many different retcons of DC's history, because like there's been so many retcons, and this tried to like consolidate them all. And one of them was that Jason Todd came back to life. So someone had to punch reality for him to come back to life, and then he was taken in by Talia after just being like a street like goblin, just kind of mugging people, and then put in the Lazarus pit. And after that whole like memories coming back super suddenly, he kind of wants revenge on Bruce. He doesn't want revenge on Bruce. He wants to teach Bruce a lesson. So yeah, that's what happened. And he teams up with Hush to do that at first. This all kind of builds up from Hush, sort of. So it's not even just Reality Punch. It's Hush happens, and in the middle of that, it looks like Jason Todd came back to life, but it turns out it was Clayface. But then that's retcon because of Infinite Crisis, and so it turns out Clayface was only at the second half of the fight, and the first half of the fight actually was Jason Todd. But again, that was all retconned after the fact. Like, realistically, it should have just been, Hush should have just been Jason Todd, or like, if not that, he should have just came back in that story, and it would have been more impactful, because that was really good setup, and it was beautifully drawn, but, that's not what ended up happening. Instead, we got this weird little mishmash. The animated movie actually did a lot better. It's just, instead of any reality warping stuff, let's see, Ra's al Ghul just felt guilty because he was sort of involved with the death of Jason Todd, so he decided to put him in the Lazarus pit to bring him back. Really simple. Just go straight to that, and also no weird underage kissing from Talia that way, because she did that. Talia and consent. That took a while to not be weird. But let's actually get into the story a little bit. But it's hard not to compare it to the animated movie, because the animated movie is really good, and it really is what endeared me to Red Hood. It makes him more sympathetic than this story does. This story really shows to me the hypocrisy of Jason when it comes to all this. And a lot of people, they use the story to like show how Bruce is a hypocrite. But I think it really solidifies why Bruce has the no-kill rule. Bruce is the type of person that knows himself really well. He has to, like, right? And he understands more than anyone. Like, when he sees Jason, the way he is now as the Red Hood, he sees what he could have been. He was a young man full of rage and hate and a need for justice. And justice that, like, doesn't come easy. But, how do you get that, right? Bruce decided that he knew exactly how he wanted to. And if he ever, killed somebody, that would be a bridge too far. And, he would never come back from that. And that's the point of Bruce's no-kill rule. He knows, yeah, of course, us, a regular person. Like, oh, yeah, kill the Joker. Like, why, like, keep him around? But Bruce understands himself, and, like, that's not how I would do that. If I kill the Joker, then what does it matter? Anybody is fair game. And, like, that's up to you whether, that's correct or not. Like, I don't know, like, does the Condiment King need to be killed because he did a thing? You know what I mean? Like, it becomes so situational where he's like, why am I the one deciding whether, like, this person lives or dies or not? And Jason doesn't get that. Jason's like, no, once a sinner, always a sinner. Which really is really sad coming from him. It's like, I've become what I am, and I'll always be what I am now. There's no redemption that he can see for himself after doing all of this, at the end of the story at least. So to, like, get to that point, to get to the point where he confronts Bruce, he's, taken over the drug empire. He's cut off people's heads. He's tortured heroes. Onyx, who's a Gotham-based superhero, she gets tortured essentially by Red Hood, and to me, it's like, you're doing this for yourself. Like, this is very selfish. Like, there's no heroism in what you're doing. Like, you're doing this all to prove a point, but it's like you're just hurting more people than anything. And even like, oh, I don't peddle. We're not gonna peddle to kids. It's like, okay, that's not the only consequence of drugs that is bad. Like, direct, like, peddling to kids. It's like, okay, but you're still selling to their parents, and then their parents are hooked and, like, abuse their kids, and it's like a whole cycle. And Jason Todd, being from the streets of Gotham, should know that better than anyone. That you don't need this. You don't need to be hooked on drugs to feel the effect of drugs if someone in your family does drugs. Like, I don't know. Like, to me, Jason is very short-sighted and a hypocrite in this story, and it makes sense because he's so angry, and he wants to get justice so bad that he's like demolishing everything in his way. He even witnessed Bloodhaven blow up, and he's like, oh, fuck Nightwing. I guess those acrobatics and those sticks ain't gonna help you now. That dude thought you were a brother to him, and you're making a joke about him dying right now? That's wild. I will say, I do not like the ending of this arc. It just kind of ends. I don't remember how the movie ends exactly. I just remember the little flashback at the end that's like tears. Fucking tears. But this ending is just kind of like, oh, the building collapses where they're all like fighting, and that's it. Yeah, that's about it. And, ooh. Okay. The one thing, though I understand Bruce's no kill rule, I get it. I 100%. I'm in favor of that for him. Not every hero has to have a no kill rule, but for Bruce it makes sense. But the other thing, it's like, you threw the batarang at his neck, and it's like, I'm not gonna kill the Joker, but I'll fucking slit your throat, Jason. It's like, okay. Once again, you thought he was family before. He was your son. You have a shrine to him, and you just slit his neck with a batarang. It's like, okay. So, a little bit of sloppy writing. This story was adapted way better in the animated movie, the first one with Supernatural guy. This one, it was so beholden also to the continuity that it was in, which is like, oh, Road to Infinite Crisis stuff happening, and it's like, here's the society, and okay, it kind of slows it down a little bit. And usually I like this writer a lot. It's Judd Winnick who's writing it, and if you don't, if you've never read Judd Winnick, you gotta read his Outsiders. Oof, that's honestly what got me into comic books, The Outsiders, which was happening around this point in time. Um, Outsiders, his Exiles, ooh, his Green Arrow, like, he's really good. And so this is a little disappointment, but again, I think it's like, I feel there's a lot of editorial that got in the way of this story, and I don't know. Like, I don't know how Jason ended up a good guy. Like, reading this, it's such a departure, like, because he's straight up a villain here. And, like, I know now Jason is more like of an anti-hero, like he works with the Bat family, he has rubber bullets or no bullets sometimes. But the road to that must have been very, like, very difficult, and, like, I should read more Red Hood, honestly, because, like, I do like the character Jason Todd. Like, I understand, how difficult it was for him. And I also understand, like, he was essentially alone for most of that. Unlike Bruce, who had at least, Alfred and stuff like that, Jason was completely alone for most of it. Which, it's gonna make you resentful, it's gonna make you rageful. These characters are very different than they appear to be from the outside. And I appreciate that, it's like two different takes on the same idea. And, quality aside, both characters now, I feel, are in a good spot. I haven't read anything with Bucky in a while, but at the same time, I was like, I get his character. I understand what he's doing. The most I know about Bucky now is, like, for Marvel Rivals, and, like, I like drawing him. I think, I think he's neat, you know? And, yeah, that's it. I don't know what else to talk about. I just was talking. I was just yapping. Sorry about that. But, yeah, I'm gonna make other videos. Maybe. I don't know. Probably.